All right. I am here today with Keith Callaway Jr. Keith Callaway Sr. wanted to make that very clear when we were chatting of K&L Industries, and just gonna talk about some stuff, learn a little bit more about the company that you guys have from your perspective, and hopefully get some tidbits of information that that listeners can take and run with and learn from.
Absolutely. Yeah, most of the people that know my dad and I, if they know both of us, we're senior or junior. And if you don't know my dad or they don't know that I'm a junior, then it's Keith. So I always can tell like if you know my family or not by what you call me.
There you go. So do people just call you Junior?
Yeah, most of the
Yeah.
all the guys at work just call me junior. All the sales guys, all the way down to, I mean, basically everybody. Like, it's just easier to call them junior and senior.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, do you have kids of your own?
I do not.
No,
Nope.
no. Yeah,
I've been fortunate enough to have those yet.
if you did, would you continue the family name on down, or?
I would consider it. You know, I think that there's something to be said for some continuity and lineage. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously if I had a boy, I don't know if I'd doom a girl to be named Keith the third.
He'd be Junior.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
that is a running joke, junior.
that's
So
awesome. That's great. No, I appreciate you hopping on. I was saying just quickly before I pressed record. I've seen you around. You're very active. Both of you guys are very active in the community. Although I think your dad just jumped on social media here this year. He was telling me
yeah,
that the whole family was freaking out because they're like, "What's going on?"
yeah, we were like, hey mom, did pretty sure dad's getting scammed or
Yeah,
something, because there's like Instagram, Facebook, like all this is just showing up now.
identity
And she's
theft
like,
central.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And she's like, no, that's him. He decided that, in 2020 he's gonna get involved in that side of the world. Like,
that's awesome.
wow, cool.
That's awesome. So tell me a bit about yourself, and I'm just getting into this kind of group. I've jumped into the paving group there, I don't know, a month or so ago, and have already connected with some great people. Tell me a bit about where you kind of fall into that, and I know you've been making videos and stuff, so get me up to speed with that.
Yeah, so obviously I'm second generation. My dad started this business the year I was born, and then it looked a lot different back then than it does now. And growing up, I swore to myself that there's no way that I would do this for a living, and never say never, because
Yeah,
this is what I'm doing for a living, and I enjoy it, and I'm pretty good at it.
yeah,
Um, as far as like what my role is here, like my dad's kind of the patriarchy, oversees things and does like the leadership stuff, runs meetings, manages people, and then like I pretty much schedule, run, work with the salespeople on a daily basis, and I run the paving operation. Um,
gotcha. So you're kind
so
of boots on the ground a little
yeah, I'm
bit more
boots on
than
the
you would.
ground.
Yeah,
I know. In talking with you about a time that we could put together, I was like, either it's got to be early or late, because
yeah,
because I have guys showing up at 6:30 or 7, and my schedule is completely unpredictable. I'm available by phone, but it's unpredictable for the rest of the day.
sure. Yeah, and it should be noted that it's 6 o'clock for you right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I
So
had got up.
we've been chatting for well, I've seen you on like at least 45 minutes ago, so you're regularly crushing your day pretty early then.
Yeah. I mean, I may not actually get out of bed every day at 5, but I try to get up and have my quiet time and start my day early,
Yeah,
because I know for me that if I don't have a solid hour before I interact with my employees, that my day is probably not going to go as good as it could.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So,
That's awesome. So you guys, when did you jump into the industry? Um,
so I went to I graduated high school, and my delusion at the time, my dream slash delusion, was that being the oldest of 7 kids, my parents were like, look, you're gonna have to kind of support yourself through college. And the goal was at the time to go to trade school and figure out a way to make some money so I could put myself through and potentially get a law degree, because I
yeah,
liked arguing, and I was like, seems like a logical conclusion,
yeah, yeah,
that I could go argue and people would pay me for it.
yeah.
Um, so I did that. I came back. I ended up marrying my first girlfriend, and that was mostly my 20s. Life was fairly uneventful, and kind of how it all shaped up is that I ended up getting a divorce in my later part of my 20s, and then started to experience the things that most people experience in college, and went off a slippery slope down
A wild
into
ride, as they say.
a wild ride. Yes,
Yeah.
I got some mug shots to prove it, and anyway, I've been sober about 5 years, and
Awesome.
so life I've got like these three stages of life, like adolescence, my 20s, and then sober. And
Nice.
so there's all these different phases to the business world and the personal world that match up. And a lot of it melds nicely in the paving industry. I mean, this is a second chance industry,
Sure.
and I get the opportunity to explain the why and the how to the guys that we have on our crew and our team members. And so sometimes when they don't know what they're doing, I can say, hey, listen, I know what this looks like long term. Let me tell you a story about what happened to me.
Gotcha.
And it's a really valuable leadership tool to be able to pull these guys aside and say, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this is where this heads and this is where it ends up. Right? It may not end up there for you, but in the near future, but it could end up there long term if you're not really careful.
Right. No, that's awesome. And actually, I mean, maybe if we can derail a little bit here, I don't know if you saw my post in Paving Nation, kind of asking what people's struggles were in the paving and seal coating world. And something that popped up for a lot of people was employees,
Mm-hmm.
retaining employees, finding good employees. And so since I knew you kind of worked more with the employees in the company, I was very interested to learn your perspective on that. And I mean, you just opened up that, you might even have a better perspective than some people. So
Yeah.
maybe talk a bit about that. A lot of people were saying, either people don't want to work or they don't show up on time, or like, what do you do to foster a good work environment, to foster employee retention and all that good stuff?
So those struggles aren't unique to any one company. Those are struggles that are, I mean, across the board. And I'm not gonna cookie coat it or sugarcoat it and say, oh, we don't have those, we're great here. But we do develop a culture. We're committed to developing a culture that says, I need you to show up every day, and we're not as strong without you. And here's what that looks like over the course of a year.
Yeah.
If you show up, if you do these things, and bonus system, and the bonuses don't have to be monetary. They can be things that are, like if you like Disneyland, if you like days off, if you like some of our guys like soccer, some of them like kids, some of them like, sporting events or whatever it is, you have to get to know the people and learn what motivates them in order to keep the culture up.
Yeah.
But a lot of it goes to starting at what motivates them, and then also explaining to them that like the name on the front of the jersey, the K&L name, is more important than the name on the back, which is their name. Like, we're just a hand in a bucket of water, right?
Gotcha.
Like, you put your hand in a bucket of water, pull it out, you still got a bucket of water. You can't think of yourself as overly important because the machine is going to move forward with or without you.
Gotcha. So how do you go about, from the onboarding process to where they kind of realize that? What steps do you take to bring that across to them?
So there's a couple of things that we do, and I think we do a couple of them really, really, really well. One is that we make a point of having a good time at work, and it's kind of infectious. And so it used to be like, we needed employees, so we just asked around, hey, who has a friend that wants to work? And we'd get a few guys, and they just show up and they just start working. Like, there was no defined interview process. There was no personality studies. There was,
Right.
all these different things that you really should do to make sure that you're getting characters that fit together and meld well.
Yeah.
We didn't do any of that. We just took what we could and then said, I wonder why it doesn't work when it didn't work.
Yeah.
So the onboarding process, what we try to do is we try to have a solid week of training where, okay, today you're shadowing this guy, and I want you to see every different little facet of our business. So making sure that we have a systematic and predictable onboarding process. We took the time to write down job descriptions, and we did it in a different way. The paving companies, they're different in how we interact because you're in a different place every day. So I can't say this guy that does this today is going to be the same guy that does it tomorrow, because we don't know if we're going to keep the crew big or if we're going to separate and got people prepping on one job. And so
Because you're jumping around from a bunch of different
right.
jobs. Right?
Like I just set the schedule for next week, and I think we have 14 locations in
Nice.
1 week. Right.
Nice. Yeah.
So what we did is we wrote job descriptions on a piece of paper, and they're tied to seats. So like the seat in this truck is this job. And
Okay.
so it started to put that accountability laterally to the other guys. And because a lot of the things that people say, oh, they're lazy, they don't want to work. Well, the reality is they're not necessarily lazy. They just don't know what they're supposed to do, and there's no structure.
Right.
So if we added structure, the culture started to change, right? The standard is the standard. And if you have no standard, your standard is nothing.
Right. And then it's just up to the individual to kind of set their own standard. Yeah.
And so like the people that are born with that innate ability to be responsible, they end up carrying the bulk of the load, and they get tired and they get burnt out, and they end up leaving.
And they hate their job. And
maybe they don't hate their job. Maybe they just despise the people around them because they feel like they're the one doing all the work.
Right.
And the reality, they're carrying the bulk of the load.
Yeah.
So we wrote down job descriptions so that we could have definable standards to hold everybody to.
Yep.
And then we have toolbox talks, a minimum of once a month. We try to do them every day. But there are days we don't do them.
Talk to me. Is that basically where people can vent their struggles, or?
Combination of things. So sometimes it's on a job site, and so we're talking about jobs. Sometimes it's at the shop where we can say, hey, I want everybody to come here so we can just catch up, because it's not often that we all get to be in the same spot at the same time.
Sure.
Right. Like we have truck drivers that I send to the asphalt plant or the gravel quarries, and they don't get the toolbox talk with the paving crew or the seal coating crew or the prep crew.
Sure.
So we make sure that we're interacting with people on a regular and daily basis, and that they understand that there is a standard, right? Like, when we ask a guy to start driving a vehicle, I mean, it's as simple as saying, hey, listen, part of being responsible for the vehicle is making sure that the people that are riding in your vehicle are taking the trash out at the end of the day.
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to say you can't eat in it. I'm not going to say you can't do any of that. But here's the deal. We want to leave every place, just like every job site, cleaner than we found it, because it's a matter of pride.
Yep.
And, and it's representing us. And when you open the door, you get out of the job site and trash falls out, it's a really bad first impression.
Yeah. You're probably going to be second guessing who you hired the whole time. Right?
Exactly. And so that's a combination of having standards. And then what we started doing is we started asking a lot more questions. We started saying, hey guys, what do you feel like you do well? And what do you feel like you don't do well? And then where do you feel like you're on an island where you're alone and you carry the bulk of the load for the company? Mm-hmm. And, let's talk about what that looks like for you versus other people's perspective of that same thing. Does the rest of the group, do your teammates, you guys you're shoulder to shoulder in the trench of work with, feel like that in fact is true for you? And if not, is there another person who feels the same way? And maybe you guys are like having this tug of war. Sure. In your roles.
Yeah.
Because
you're always trying to prove that, you're actually doing more and so you.
Yeah. And I think that the value in that allows people to have a voice and be heard, because people crave so desperately to be heard and to be a part of something today.
Yeah.
That when you allow them the opportunity to even, and we're totally cool with people even asking for a job description to be changed.
Like being moved around on the team or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, hey, I don't, and I tell people, I'm like, listen, this is always a work in progress. We're always willing to change things, but I want to make sure that you guys understand that you have a say in it. But we need to understand why you think that way. So if you think that, Billy Bob over here should be doing this particular thing that you're having a hard time getting done, tell me why. Sure. Is it a time conflict? Are you supposed to be doing two things on the job at the same time? Okay, that makes sense to me. Who at that same moment where he's doing this seems to have time every day, right? And let's change that particular task to this person.
Gotcha. Yep.
So a lot of it had to do with asking questions, and I didn't realize that was having a standard and asking questions. Those are huge culture things.
Huge, yeah, and I mean, like, you guys are a family business that started kind of from the ground up, and I've worked in a few family businesses, and I know that making that transition from being small to, how many people do you have now?
22.
So a sizable crew. So making that transition from, one truckload of guys going out to one job a day to where you are now, obviously you had some issues before switching, I would imagine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of brain damage. We call it brain damage that happens when you go through the growing pains of, um, I call it like when you take away the micromanagement of an owner who holds everything so personally. It's like he holds it right here because he doesn't want to lose it.
Or he hasn't made a process.
Yeah, he hasn't made a
Yeah.
process, right?
Yeah.
So part of it is understanding that until you slow down and create processes and procedures, you can't speed up. Like
Sure.
if every small business owner reaches a plateau in which he realizes he can no longer do everything and continue to grow.
Yeah.
And so you have to trust people. And one of the really valuable things about being in a family business is that I understand and I trust my father.
Sure.
Right. I trust him. I know that if I ask him to do something, if it doesn't get done, there's a pretty good reason why.
Sure.
And we without having to talk about it, we have the same goal.
Yep.
Right. Like I understand that, family, success, these things they're all important, but the reality is survival and keeping us as a family unit. And we include, we include the organizational family as well in those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have to put things together. I know that it was a struggle at the beginning of when my dad, and I really respect him for this because I'm going to have a hard time doing this at some point someday,
Yep.
is taking my hands off things and saying, okay, you're really good at this. Why don't you take it?
Sure.
Logistically, I've always understood logistics.
Yep.
And
who needs to be where when.
Who needs to be where when, and I don't know how to explain it to people, but I can tell you, based on the numbers that are on a salesman's piece of paper, I can tell you how many minutes I need trucks loaded apart.
Gotcha.
And when they need to get loaded so that we're about ready when they start showing up, so that we've got everything prepped and all the paving crew and all the pavers and rollers show up at the job.
There's no pause or trucks cooling off
right.
or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of traffic accidents and things like that, like I'm pretty darn good. We can get 20% more out of every day with good planning.
Sure. Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And so the logistics part I understood. And so my dad took his hands off and kind of let me sink or swim with it. And I, and I would say that is one area that I've always been pretty successful. Also, writing things down and this year has been one of my focuses has been taking my hands off even more.
Okay.
Right. So I'm learning how to do this on the fly, right? Because the last couple of years since I got sober, I didn't have a driver's license. And so I was like married to the crew. I couldn't do anything. Right. I would get a ride to the job. I would run the job site, and then somebody would drive me home.
Sure. Yeah.
and since, I've stayed sober and gotten a few things back and got my life put back together. And what has happened is that, I went from like a great foreman to, I realized that that if I continued to operate in that role and I didn't step back and teach the other guys and let them grow, then I was going to continue to have to do that forever.
You basically cap off how far the team could go.
And what changed that is I heard a guy tell me, he goes, don't take that thing or that task out of that person's hand unless you're willing to do it for the next 10 years. So if a guy's struggling with something, and that statement isn't there to tell you to just alienate people and let them figure it out. The statement's there to say, hey, if you see someone struggling and it's definitely a 2-man job, go help them.
Yeah.
But don't demoralize them or take the wind out of their sails by saying, hey, why don't you let me do that? Because I know how to do it better than you.
Right.
Because, and it came down to like, I was helping guys shovel and sweep and do all the different things. And now what I do, like even yesterday, one of our truck drivers, he gets a blister on his hand and pulls it off. And I said, hey, does that hurt? And he goes, I mean, I'm all right. I said, is it going to hurt later? And he looks at me and I said, I mean, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. And he goes, yeah. And I said, can I show you how you can do that without getting blisters? And he's like, yeah, why would you wait until after I got one? I said, because before you got one, you'd never listen.
Yeah.
And I showed him a different technique to do the same thing. And he goes, wow, I never thought of it that way. And I said, I mean, this is my 20th season doing this. So there might be some information in how I do things that could potentially help you.
Some lack of feeling you've developed in your hands over time.
Yeah.
And blisters.
Yeah. And I said, we just talked about the logistics of it. And I said, listen, without pain, there doesn't become a willingness to appreciate somebody else's input.
Sure.
And so my goal this year is to take my hands off a little more. And I got to brag for a minute. the most tons we've ever laid in a day is 1,730 tons. That was a
Wow,
week ago Tuesday.
that's amazing.
And before that, the most I'd ever done was 1,121. So
Pretty
we
big
beat it
jump.
by over 600 tons.
Yeah.
And I have to brag because I didn't run the paving machine or one piece of equipment for 1 minute.
And is that a new thing for you? Like, would you usually
Yeah.
be kind of jumping in?
Yeah. I would be usually the guy sitting on the paving machine, keeping everything running forward. And I didn't run it 1 minute.
So what did you, that's awesome. That's awesome. What
Yeah.
did you do instead?
So we had a little snafu in the morning. The trucks actually showed up to the wrong plant. And so we were running about a half hour behind. And it was good because it gave me time to sit down with everybody on a job talk and say, hey, here's what my goal is today. I'd like to hear your guys. This is the layout. And we talked about the specifics of the job. And I said, here's what I'd like to do because tomorrow's supposed to rain. I'm going to challenge you guys to finish this job today. I'm going to be here running logistics. I'll make sure the trucks are getting here. I'll make sure that if there's gaps in the trucks that I find more. I'll make sure you guys have the tools that you need to be successful. But what I want you to do, and I'm asking you if you think you can, is to finish this job today. And they all looked around and they're like, come on, no problem. You know, and
They stepped up to the challenge, right?
yeah, they stepped up to the challenge. And in 10 hours, you know, I think the last time I paved that much, you know, the 1,100 tons, it was like a 12-hour day. In 10 hours, they paved 1,734 tons.
That's amazing.
And they crushed it. And the customer, like I got an email from the customer and she read this article on LinkedIn. She said, this is what, she said, I was reading an article that basically described world-class companies. And there's 10 attributes of world-class companies. And she goes, and you guys epitomize the definition of world-class. You set yourself apart. You are all about service. You never make the customer feel like they're wrong. You always take the time to listen. Every one of your guys from top to bottom looked at me, talked to me, and treated me like I was valuable and like what I had to say mattered. And she goes, and that's a really hard thing to find in the business world today. And
especially the paving world, right? Like I know there's been some excellent changes lately, but you know, the paving world has a bit of a bad rap.
Yeah, it's got a really bad rap. You know, we and it's sad because we get more work by answering the phone and showing up than we do anything else. Like I would say that of the 100+ paving companies in our area, 90 of us do everything the same.
Yeah.
Right. The difference is how you on the front side and back side interact with your customer. It's not what you do on the job because everybody does pretty much the same thing on the job.
Yeah.
It's how you treat the customer before and how you treat them after. Because they want to feel like they're a person. You know, they don't remember what you did or what you said. They remember how you made them feel.
Well, and they're investing a sizable chunk of change into whatever you're doing too, right? So if you 100%. Can make them feel like it was worth it, then you've gone a long way.
100%.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. I really appreciate you diving into that with the team there because, you know, I can have my theories, but hearing it from someone, and I think especially for everyone who's in the paving world, hearing it from someone who's actually out there making things happen, I think that's going to mean a whole lot more than me being like, oh, I think this is what you should do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like you having a better ability to influence your team because you've been there, done that with the with kind of sliding down that slippery slope.
Yeah.
So for someone who doesn't, I mean, it seems like you're kind of a natural leader. For someone who doesn't have that, what would you say to them if they're leading a team? Would you have tips to kind of point them in a direction to become that, or?
100%. I think that if you're a leader or put in a leadership position, so sometimes you're not a leader, but you're still overseeing or managing people.
Yeah.
You guys, as a team, you know, whatever that ownership group looks like or management group looks like you have to have standards and principles that you guys live by, and they're not negotiable. Mm-hmm. Some people call them core values. Some people call them a number of different things. We call them standards, and we have little sayings that develop culture around that, like show up on time every day. And there's, you know, and to a certain extent, there's punishments around some of that, like we believe in second and third chances. But that doesn't mean that we believe in forgetting about what you did.
Sure.
Right. So if you abuse the fuel card and you're a truck driver, chances are we'll let you be a truck driver again, but you're not getting a fuel card.
Right.
You're going to have to earn that back. My mom says trust is a free gift once. And after that, you're going to have to work really hard, and you may never get it back.
Sure.
So you got to understand, like, set standards and hold people accountable.
Sure.
That's first and foremost.
Yep. So if someone's showing up late, what would kind of be your reaction to that?
So we have had some guys. So our in-house reaction used to be like, just roll your eyes, man. I wish I could get this figured out. I don't know how to deal with this. It's really frustrating.
What a lot of people are struggling with, right?
100%, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we figured out that we had to do is that we set a standard for what late looked like. So if you're more than 15 minutes late, and we just took this from a buddy of mine in Louisville, he sent us his standard, and because we were struggling with it, he said, I have a written one. He goes, it's really hard to enforce, but I have it.
Who was that?
If Kevin Gray from ADC,
cool.
ADC paving.
Cool.
If you're more than 15 minutes late, you're not coming to work that day. Sorry, okay. I'm not waiting more than 15 minutes for anybody. And the reality is that we have, and this was one of the guys that worked for me the longest, pulled one of those. So if you more than 15 minutes late, you don't get to come to work that day. You're more than 15 minutes late the second time, you get a couple days off. 15 minutes late the third time, you get 3 days off, or a week, anyway, it goes up to a month, and like the fourth or fifth time, you're just gone.
It goes without saying that's without pay, right? So
right, yeah, these are all without pay.
A bit of a sting.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sting, 100%. Yeah. So, and the idea is not to punish people. Like, if traffic accidents happen, out here in Portland, traffic is horrible.
Yeah.
Like, we're like one of the top 10 worst cities for traffic.
Yeah.
We got cities and mountains, and they built highways through them, and there's nowhere to expand these highways, and so it's just terrible.
Sure.
But what the 15 minutes late doesn't say, hey, I'm calling you at 6:30, I'm on my way, but traffic is stopped. If you call and do that, I feel like you're part of the team. You're part of a problem that we're attacking, and say, okay, cool. We're not going to wait for you. When you show up, jump in your truck, head to the job.
It allows you to plan for it. And
100%.
Yeah.
Right. So it's more the like, no call, no show. I overslept, or I got drunk last night and I can't get out of bed because I'm too hungover.
Right.
It's that type of stuff.
Right.
So what ended up happening is, there was a guy who had a doctor's appointment, and I said, that's cool. Go to your doctor's appointment, but we still need you tomorrow. So show up, because the habit was that people would just not show up because they had a doctor's appointment. They just take a personal day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, this is not going to happen. Like, we can't build a business around people who are inconsistent.
Yeah.
And so the guy, and he worked for me a long time. He worked for me for 14, 15 years. He didn't show up that day. He shows up the next day, and my dad goes out and talks to him, and he says, hey man, the standard's the standard. I gotta send you home. And the guy got emotional. He's like, and emotional both in a like, I'm mad way, and like, I didn't think you'd do this to me.
Yeah.
Right. He thought he was better than the standard.
Yeah.
And it started to change the culture. The guys started to see that we were serious about everybody showing up.
If you're going to do it to him, then you were going to do it to anybody, right?
Anybody. Right.
Yeah.
Anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
And that changed how we are running our business today.
Sure.
That simple choice. And actually, little sidebar, that guy ended up quitting about 4 or 5 months later.
Really?
He thought that we weren't treating him well enough. He didn't like the way my dad was talking to him. And what he didn't realize is that my dad was trying to hold him accountable.
Sure.
It wasn't that my dad was treating him bad. He's like, hey man, you're in your 30s. I need you to stop acting like you're in your 20s.
Right.
I need you to grow up.
Yeah.
You want to get paid like a big boy, and you want to get paid like you're being responsible. I need you to act like it. So he went and worked for somebody else, and then ended up coming back about 6 weeks ago, right before the COVID stuff started.
Okay.
And and he realized that some of the stuff that he had thought originally perhaps wasn't quite as accurate as he had realized.
Right. Do you have to catch something there?
No.
Okay. I don't know when. Let me know how much time you have too, because I don't want to be keeping you from your work day.
Oh, we're good. I was just looking. The trucks are rolling in and out outside my office. So.
Gotcha. Okay. I heard your phone ringing there, so I wanted to make sure you were good.
Yeah. No, we're good. My computer. It's actually my computer ringing.
Oh, even better.
Yeah.
So basically, he kind of pushed back against it a bit, but then he realized that he actually did like the culture enough that, obviously he put his big boy pants on and came back.
Yeah. Yeah. We have, I will say that we have a company culture for a paving company that is, I don't, I don't know if it's, quote, world class, but I know that
Sounds pretty.
we have something different than most people have.
Yeah.
And the guys generally speaking like to come to work. I wrote and it's the little things, right? So this guy walks in and he shows me this picture of this English bulldog. And this is one of the kids that we were having a problem with show up, and I made a deal with him, and I don't bet, I don't gamble. As a general rule, I try to make sure that I don't have anything that could send me off, down a world that I don't want to go back into.
Yeah.
And there was a couple guys in the office, and he goes, "Oh man, this is a cool dog. This is a cool dog." And I said, and his name's DG. And I said, DG, you don't miss one day the rest of 2020. If you're here every day for the 2020 season, I'll buy you that English bulldog. It's a pretty expensive dog. It's like a $3,500 dog, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he goes, "What?" And I said, let's write it down. I said, you miss 0 days for 2020. I'll buy you an English bulldog. And he's like, "No way." And I said, "Write it down. Let's write a contract right now. I'll put one in your box. You can have a copy. I'll keep a copy. If you have no unexcused absences." He's like, "Well, wait, I got a kid coming. Is like me being gone while the kid's being born?" I said, no, that's a whole different story. What I'm talking about is like the Monday morning or the morning after Taco Tuesday, you having a hard time getting to work on time. He's like, "Oh, okay. So like if I have a doctor's appointment, that doesn't count?" Like, no, those are totally different things. Like if you don't miss a day,
he was getting you to read the terms and conditions.
Yeah, exactly. We were setting terms and conditions
Yeah.
and I said, "Here's the deal. I'll buy you a dog." And
Awesome.
it's little things like that, like the kid feels heard. He feels like that I listened to what he wanted, and then he got to make a decision on whether or not that was a good choice. And I had some other guys who were like, "Well, what do I get if I show up the rest of the year?" And I looked at them and I was like, "I don't make bets that I think I'm going to lose."
Right.
And I said, and here's the deal: if I have to buy him a dog, I won anyway.
Exactly.
And they're like, "What?" And I said, "You guys show up every day. You guys already have kids. You're already responsible." And I said, "If he shows up the rest of the year, is your life easier or harder?" And they're like, "Well, it's easier." And I said, "Exactly. You win too, even if he gets a dog."
Yeah.
And I said, "It's not about what he gets. It's about what we get as an entire group."
Yeah.
And that was one of those moments where I got to teach the other guys, "Hey, listen, it's not always about me. It's about us. It's about we. But yes, there are things that we can do to encourage each other and push each other to be better."
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I think there's a lot of gold in here for people. I think we kind of touched on it, but for people who maybe are thrust into that leadership position, you did touch on it a bit, but what resources would you suggest? I mean, some people like books, some people like going to conferences, some people,
I can tell you that when I started looking at the idea of leadership, I had no idea. I'm a pretty spiritual guy. I read the Bible a lot.
Yeah.
So and I was real hesitant to that when I got sober. Right? Like this idea of God was just way out there.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I'd been mistreated and had some things happen in my life that, if there was a God, that wouldn't happen. And then what I didn't realize is that I created those situations.
Sure.
My consequence was really bad things happening to me for a bunch of poor choices.
Sure.
I mean, it's logical now, but at the time I was a victim, and victims don't get better.
Sure.
So when it came to leadership, I didn't understand where to go, what to do. Like the simple idea of following the law seemed tough. When I didn't have a driver's license, all I wanted to do was drive.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you could.
Because I could. Yeah. Or somebody told me I couldn't, and I was like, "Hold my beer. Watch this."
Yeah.
And so leadership had to start with respect, right? With me, like I want to be respected, and in order to be respected, you have to give respect. And so I started reading some books. I started watching people who were good leaders. There's a lot of guys in my circle. Brian Hess, Kevin Gray, Judd Burton, Braden Hamilton. If you follow the people that I interact with on Instagram and Facebook, you're going to see the same 15 or 20 dudes on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think I've seen everybody but Braden so far.
Braden's up in BC.
Okay.
But these are guys that these are my friends. And I didn't 3 or 4 years ago, I had friends that were in front of me. Now, most of my friends, most of them, totally online. Right. Like these are guys that I don't see, but I changed my circle. Like I was getting friends that on their outside, they look like what I felt like on my inside.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is that I was never going to level up until I started pulling a chair up to a table with the people that had what I wanted.
You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with, right?
Right. Yeah. And the sum total of those 5 people wasn't great. And so
Yeah.
I started changing those 5 people. And as I did that, I started getting some of their characteristics and their personality traits and their leadership qualities that started to just kind of rub off on me.
Gotcha.
You know, I started asking questions like, you know, what is the standard? How do I hold people to this? You know, how do I get people to listen to me? I'm a young guy. Most of my employees are older than me. How do I get them to respect what I have to say and to listen to it? And all of that is part of it is like, you know, old books like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
Right. Like old things like that. Like I didn't understand the basic principles of human psychology. And if
Just
you don't
making
understand
people feel heard and
right.
wanted and needed, right?
Right. Like I can have really tough conversations and people, you know, this is a theme that's happened through my life. I can have tough conversations and I can say things that most people can't get away with saying because I say it in a way that people will listen.
Sure.
And I can logic people or walk them with me through a series of conversation that gets them to where we need to go.
You're
like
basically a lawyer.
Kind of. Well, I mean, some people call it manipulation. I like to tell people like I have an ability to put words out that make you feel what I'm feeling inside.
Sure.
So if we need to get to, you know, over your personality thing, and this is some examples, like if you have a guy around you that laughs and jokes the same way that he gets mad, and he probably has zero idea that's how he communicates. So when he gets mad and he goes, how do people not know I'm frustrated? I'm like, because your joking voice and your frustrated voice are the same.
Gotcha.
Right. Like, and they go, what? I'm like, the same tone you use for both. And how, you know, like, how are we supposed to differentiate the two?
Yeah.
I was like, if your daughter goes, and then 15 minutes later, she goes, but one was because she was mad and the other because you said something silly. Like, how are you supposed to know what that reaction was with her?
Right.
You know, and I put it in that, like the parent kid thing and he understood it.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, a lot of it is spending time, like taking a look at yourself, because a good leader is one that will take a look at his character flaws or her character flaws and start ferreting out the things that don't serve them on a higher level.
Gotcha.
Right. Like discipline for me has been one, writing things down, making lists, constantly listening to podcasts. My dad sent me one the other day of Dean Graziosi and Ed Milet.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We were chatting a bit about Ed.
Yeah. So Dean, and he sends me the one of Dean Graziosi. He goes, this guy reminds me so much of you, because he talks about my vision. Like my vision is to help people, but it's a relentless forward progress and like an unrelenting, unwavering commitment to achieving my goals. Mm-hmm. And bringing people around me that can achieve their goals simultaneously while I'm chasing mine.
Exactly.
And, you know, and so like owning a house for these guys is a goal of theirs. One of the guys is a multiple time felon. He just got a house last week, just closed on it.
That's amazing.
And he goes, I never would have been able to do that if I stayed working where I was and never got around people like you guys.
Yeah.
You know, and he calls my dad.
Nice.
Because he's never had one. Right. Yeah. But that's just an example of somebody else getting their dream and their goal while chasing.
As you push toward yours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, and I think that good leadership is defined by a couple of really key principles. One, setting a goal and chasing it. Having standards and processes that can allow the people around you to be successful and give them like a lane to stay in. If you say, hey, I want you to be successful, but you give them no structure to how they're going to do that, they're going to start over here and they're going to end potentially over here, and you both are going to be frustrated.
Sure. If
you don't say, okay, I need you to start here and stop here, how is that really fair of you to expect them? Right. Yeah. Right. So like, you know, our salespeople, it's pretty easy. Like, I want you to call people within 15 minutes.
Yep.
It's a pretty easy standard, right?
Yep.
I want you to show up for our employees. I want you to show up on time, preferably 15 minutes early, because that's respectful.
Yep.
And then when I can explain to people why it's respectful when their cable guy doesn't show up for 2 hours.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and we can
all about those analogies that relate it back to people.
Yeah. And and you got to make it so something into something they can understand. So, you know, having standards, having systems, constantly working on yourself. constantly. You know, like I'm not, success isn't a destination, it's a journey. And you got to get in the lifestyle of excavating that stuff out of you that doesn't serve you and your goals long term.
I love it. Yeah, that's a big reason why I started this podcast, was to talk to people who have been there, done that. I've recently, started my business, and through the process, I like the last year, I've grown way more than I have my entire life, because I've had to look inside myself and figure out what it is that I want, right? Because if I don't have my clear goals, I'm not going to get up in the morning. I'm not going to execute. I'm not going to reach the goals. So maybe talk a bit about what you do on a daily basis to work on yourself.
So I start, and actually it's right here, right next to me. I start with a devotional.
Which one are you using?
It's called Daily Moments of Strength, Inspiration for Men.
Okay.
And it's basically
I'm on the lookout for one, so I might look into that.
Yeah, it's a 1 year walk through the Bible. It gives you a couple verses, gives you some insight into like the psychology and the reasons why we should do things that are tough.
Yep.
I start with that every day. That's big. I have started just turning the radio off, turning the noise down, because I find that the noise distracts me from what I really don't want, which is time alone to think.
Sure.
I unplug from the things that don't serve me. And for instance, there's a lot of times that I probably write down things on Facebook or Instagram that I type them out and I go, probably shouldn't say that, because I throw it through a few things like, A, is it helpful? B, is it necessary? C, is it true? And then the last one is what I want somebody to say it to me.
Sure.
Right. Like, so
this is kind of a knee-jerk reaction sort of thing that you're about to, spew out to the internet.
Yeah. Verbal diarrhea is what I call it.
Yeah.
I'm just about, and because, being a keyboard warrior is something that we all can do, but it's never very flattering to anyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just not. It's just not. Like, if you want to act tough behind a keyboard, you're probably not that tough.
Yeah, exactly.
So just constantly chasing those things. I try to write down and choose one thing a month to work on. And actually today it's the 1st of May. And so I have to choose something this month. And because we're getting into the season, my sleep in times because of COVID have been a little all over the place. And so for the month of May, it's going to be a 5 a.m. wake up every day.
I love it.
A lot of times we don't start till 6. We sometimes don't start till 7. It's been great. We've started at 7 since this COVID thing happened because traffic is amazing right now.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, because so you can get to where you want to go.
Yeah, we get there in half the time.
Yeah.
But I know that's going to come to an end sooner than later. And so getting up at 5, putting the time in personally just sets the tone for the rest of my day.
I love it. I love
making sure I have that time with like me and God to just spend time and say, okay, I'm going to choose to be the better version of myself all day today. Align
yourself so that you're ready to crush it. And I love that because that's something that I'm actively looking for myself as well is, I've been the type to just roll out of bed and be like, okay, I'm going to go do this. But as I've started to kind of look at, having a morning routine, I'm not a routine oriented person at all. And so I've always taken pride in that. And I'm like, oh, I'm such a spontaneous guy. Like, but it's not great way to set yourself up for success. Right. And so that's, I love hearing what other people are doing to succeed. So I appreciate that. I'll check out that book as well.
Yeah. It's a great one. Yeah. It's a great one.
No, that's awesome. Well, we've covered a lot of stuff, kind of all centered around the same thing, and I'm actually really happy this happened because I think it speaks directly to what people are struggling with. I'd love to end off on one other thing, or maybe a topic you'd like to discuss. I've kind of been asking you the questions, but if you want to end off with one thing, we could talk all day, clearly.
Yeah.
But you've got to get to work, and I've got to get some stuff done as well. But
so I would tell people that if you're not where you want to go, to not get discouraged. Everybody's in a process and everybody's in different places in their process. And comparison is the thief of joy. It's an old saying, but it's so true. So if you compare yourself to anybody else, obviously there's going to be things that are different and not where they should be or not where you want them to be.
Yeah.
So rather than compare yourself to someone else, look at their success, be happy for them, and say, how do I get there? Right? Like choose some principles that you see in that person or that place. And, you know, and I love this statement, pull up a chair. Like if you want to be part of a circle, or you want someone to be in your life, especially business wise, most of the time, all you have to do is ask.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they don't answer, ask again. If they don't answer, ask again. If they say no, ask again.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
because
what I've seen with this podcast is like, you know, I saw you making videos and I was like, oh, well, he's obviously at a place that's like way further along than I am. But then I just reached out and you're like, oh, cool. Yeah, let's set something up. And that's kind of blowing my mind. But I think it's very relevant for people if they see someone who is where they want to be. Just reach out and ask, right?
reach out and ask.
Yeah.
Like you miss every shot you don't take.
Good old Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You miss every one you don't take.
I love
You got to take the shot to win and to get there.
I
So
love it.
don't be afraid to chase your dreams, you know, and be realistic. I don't want to say be pessimistic, be realistic. Understand that if you set a goal way up there, that you have to be willing to put in the work to go from where you're at to way up there. But anything is possible with enough devotion and enough work.
Terrific. I think that's a fantastic way to end. Keith, I appreciate your time. What I'll do is we'll just wrap this up. I'll end the recording and we can just chat for a bit before you have to head off to work here.
Right on.
Awesome. I appreciate it.